Welcome to Venator Chronicles Podcast. I'm Ethan Taylor.
And I'm Dustin Jelly.
Our hope is to inspire new and old hunters alike.
We hope you can join us on this journey of lessons that we have, are, and will learn through the world of hunting.
Three, two, one. We are live.
Back at it again.
Episode 7.
We are, oh wow, already at episode 7.
Yeah, we're cruising.
Oh man. So I think we're gonna finally knock this out. We've been talking about it for a little bit. My release addiction.
Oh,
my
man.
release habit, my release
the
problems.
The first step is admitting it. So we welcome you.
I am Dustin, and I have a problem with archery releases.
Yeah. We said 39 last time. What are we at, actually?
Correction, 40. Well, actually, if you want to get really technical, 41. I did pick up the other day another release, but this is a really old school, like old school hotshot release that I just wanted to have like for fun. Not to actually shoot, just because it's really cool. I'll have to bring it in.
Okay.
It's like legitimately old school. Like it was just cool. It was $10 off eBay. So I'm like, why not? Like it was sweet. So if you want to be technical,
fair enough,
41.
Fair enough.
So yeah, we were talking as I've obviously gone through probably more releases than a normal person needs to, and I realized like when I was going through all these releases and just researching, looking at YouTube videos and listening to people, there was really nothing that concise on comparing releases. Like, how do they match up against each other? How do they compare? What do they look like or feel like compared to others? And so I thought it would be really fun to just kind of do a short, and by short, hopefully like half an hour by our standards, podcast rundown on the releases I've used and what I like, dislike, what they felt like, and compared to others.
Yeah, and I think what'll be cool is that I'm probably the person that you're going to be talking to in terms of like, I'm not super deep into it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get too detailed, I'll be like, layman's term, my friend, layman's terms. And so I'm a little excited for it. And I'm also like, where is this going to go? Because to me, I'm so limited in my knowledge. I really hope that it just kind of opens up the door a little bit to these different types of releases. And I'd say as far as the extent of, as far as like compare and contrast, and this is one of the things that I've mentioned before that I do like about your mindset is like you just genuinely like to try out different things and see how they work. And it comes from a place of like, not like, oh, I need to do this. It's like, oh, I just really enjoy doing this.
Yeah, I really like finding, I've always been like kind of particular in what I like.
Yeah.
And it can be good and it can be bad.
Well, it's cool because like it offers a different perspective where you see a lot of reviews of like this versus this, and it's like one-on-one, or maybe there's 5 or 10. It's like when we're talking about 40, and we're not going to talk 41. Sorry, and we're not going to talk about every single one of them.
We aren't,
but we're gonna. I sure hope not, to be honest. I hope there's some where we can kind of get a theme from them, and why you're like, not so much. But this is why, you know what I'm saying. And so I'm kind of excited to see how this goes because I have no idea what to expect.
Yeah, and that's like with a lot of the reviews out there that I've watched and I've listened to and seen and read, they'll kind of break down that release, but they don't really give a comparison to how they compare to others. Not necessarily in like performance wise, but like fit, feel, size wise, etc. Application or whatnot. So yeah, I'm just kind of hoping to be able to provide my experience from the last couple of years of obviously having a release issue.
So this will make pretty obvious where I'm at, because I'm just going to ask you, where do you think we should start? Because I don't know.
Well, here's where I'm going to start. I'm just going to start from the beginning of the releases and just kind of walk through. I won't go into super detail. I'll just kind of give a quick overview of the releases and
probably a good idea.
Go from there. So starting off, when I first got into archery, the first release I got was TrueFire Edge, just a wrist release. I think like it's especially here in the Midwest with TrueFire, owned by Faraday, which is right down the road from us. Like it is like, I swear, the gold standard of entry level wrist releases. Like it's.
I got my free one was for my brother that was probably 10 years old, and then the next one I bought was just the same thing that was not 10 years old. So yes, that's fair to say.
Yes, so it's like the standard wrist release. It's a caliper style, so it's got like 2 fingers that come in. it's got various versions. It was just a leather. I think it had a leather wrist strap, and I used that for a little bit. And then was shooting with a buddy, and I'd seen he had a TrueFire Hardcore, which is a wrist release, but then it's got, instead of the caliper, two arms to pinch, it just has a little hook. And I kind of like that, because you could just use that hook and hook it into the D loop, and it was a slightly nicer version. It was looks really cool, and so I ended up. After a while, I ended up going out and getting that. I like that. I did notice that it wore less on the D loop compared to the caliper.
Interesting.
So that was kind of one advantage of that, and so I used that for a while, and then I kind of started getting a little interested in trying a thumb release. And the first one I ended up coming across, it was some guy off Craigslist here in Duluth, and he had this. He just said it was a thumb release, so I met up with him. It was like $20, and ended up buying it, not knowing anything about thumb releases. And what it was actually a hinge release.
You now know it was a hinge
now
release.
I know, yeah, because I got it, and I could not figure out for the life of me how to shoot this thing. So those aren't familiar with the hinge release. We'll include a link showing how it works, just because it's way easier to look at it and then try to describe it. But yeah, it was super confusing. I tried. I just could not figure it out. I didn't YouTube or Google it, which would have been the smart thing to do. But I was like, whatever, so I ended up selling that later, and
without ever using it.
I couldn't figure out how to use it without it make it going off. It was horrible. Yeah,
So you didn't give up on trying different releases.
No, and so I kept looking. Ended up coming across. What was it? Oh, I threw it out. I think I threw out a thing on Craigslist trying to sell the hardcore that I had, and some guy had contacted me saying, "Hey, I've got this TrueFire Edge thumb release." And I was like, okay, sweet. So I actually met up, and we ended up doing a trade outright. He was looking for a wrist release, and I was looking for thumb release, and so we ended up trading up for each other's. And the Edge release, it was a thumb release, but it was a caliper style, and so I was using that for a while, and I liked it, but I noticed that it really wore on the D loop, and I didn't really like that. And I was doing some research in the thumb releases, and I found that there's a couple different styles. One where it's a lever style, like I had, where you push on the thumb, it's a lever and it opens up the release, versus a sear style, which was much more it's like a trigger mechanism on a rifle. I was like, I actually would really like that, I think, because I've shot rifles for my whole life, and it would just be nice to have something closer to that. And so I ended up coming across, did some research, found I really liked the TrueFire's Thor's Hammer release, namely, if I'm honest, because of the name. Thor's Hammer, being Norwegian, total geek moment. I was like, I like that name. I want that release. It looks really cool. It's Thor's Hammer. That's the only reason that I went with that. And I ended up finding one relatively cheap. I forget where. And so I got it. And I really liked it. It was a good release. It was nice, clean, crisp. And actually, I think I only had one misfire with that when I accidentally hit the thumb while drawing back and shooting anything but the target.
So, what is it that drove you to keep changing?
Yeah. So to back up real quick. So I was actually having a lot of target panic. Shooting a wrist style where I was told not to slap the
Guilty.
Yeah, we all are when we start. I would just slap the finger mechanism instead of pulling through. I was having a lot of target panic. As soon as my sight would get it right on the target, I felt like I just had to pop that shot off real quick, and so I thought, maybe if I go to a thumb release, that might help reduce the target panic. So that was really the big push to go from a wrist release to a thumb release.
So you identified an actual problem, and you're like, wait a second, okay, is there something that can aid this?
Yeah.
Now, did you hear about it from somewhere that was it would actually help you in that, or how did you kind of come about that?
I think I ended up. Yeah, I read an article. I think it was by John Dudley talking about how your fingers are a lot more sensitive than your thumbs. So I thought, like, if that's the case, I'll try a thumb release. Help reduce that. And looking back and knowing what I know now, again, kind of we've talked about before. Joel Turner's whole shot IQ thought process is it's really understanding the process, not having different equipment. I was trying to change the equipment without actually changing my shot process and my mental thought process. So I really wasn't changing a problem, which I would find out later, which I'll get into. So I ran that TrueFire Thor's hammer all through summer into hunting. Like I said, I liked it. It was actually a smaller release. I don't have huge hands. It was a smaller release, fit my hand well. It had like a 3-finger model and a 4-finger model, and I really liked the 3-finger. But what I found though when hunting, at least later season in the winter, when I was and wearing gloves, it was it was too short. It would like get caught up in my gloves where the hook was to set it, and so like I realized like I don't necessarily like this, especially if I'm on the ground. I have to hook it in real quick. So I started doing some research. I'm like, I'd like to get one that has like a slightly longer neck, so that way it's not getting caught up in my my gloves for the next season. And so that's when I would say I really started this whole release hunt, release addiction, release issue, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. Just trying to find like what I thought would work really well, and from there ended up coming across Spot Hog. We ended up ordering at the same time. I found a Friday night delight and a Saturday night special. Pretty much the same thing, except one. I think the Friday night delight's like a closed hook where you could lock it in and you could put it on your D loop and it'd sit, and the Saturday night special was an open hook, so you could just hook it in. And those they fit well, but I found they were both actually the neck of them where the hook comes out was even shorter than the Thor's hammer. So I was like, well, those are kind of out. Yeah. Real quick.
But you weren't able to determine that outside of actually getting it and trying it out and having the equipment. Yeah.
So, and I tried doing some research, but I kind of got that in, and thankfully I found real quick that the trade, resell, and buying market for archery releases is really good, because
it's rampant.
Yeah. And so
you're not alone in your addiction, it sounds like.
No, there's many of us out there.
I'm a part of that page. I'm a part of that Facebook page you do it on.
Nothing but releases.
Oh my goodness. I am like just so every notification like I don't care.
Yeah. And so I ended up coming across Spot Hog Whippersnapper. I ended up getting in both versions, the closed hook and the open hook, and I ended up going with the open hook. Just because if I was out walking, I could hook it in real quick. I like that. It had a longer neck to it. Like the handle itself was smaller, so it fit my hand really well. But it had a nice longer neck. And I like that. And I thought like, hey, this is cool. And then I ended up also getting around the same time a Hot Shot. Actually, no. I think I got the Hot Shot Vapor first. I can't remember. It was roughly around the same time, and the Hot Shot Vapor, I'd gotten that, and it was a larger release for my hand. Like I said, I don't have super small hands, but I don't have very big hands, and the Hot Shot Vapor was a larger one. I didn't necessarily like how it felt. Like the handle's a little more swept back, so it didn't really fit in my hands super good. And that was kind of operated on the same mechanism as all the other the Spot Hogs, where it was like a lever action style where you'd push on the button, it would open up the hook and let off, and it would close the hook, which is super silent. Yeah. But the feel of it just wasn't feeling right, so I stuck with the Spot Hog Whippersnapper.
So we're real quick. How many arrows were you shooting like with each one of these before you were like kind of like felt like you got enough information, right? Because like sometimes you get something new and first it's exciting because you have something new, and then after a little while, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how long do you think it took before? Were some of them like really quick? You're just like as soon as you put it on, you're like, ugh.
I would actually say for pretty much everyone, well, not everyone, but for the vast majority of them, it was like almost an instant yay or nay. As soon as you shot like a few arrows, like at least for me, it was like, yeah, I don't necessarily really like how that feels in my hand. Like it just didn't feel comfortable, didn't feel right. Whereas like there were some releases where they felt really good, but then it kind of came down to some other factors. But for the most part, a lot of them was like as soon as some of them felt really good just holding in my hand, but then when it came to shooting, it was just like, oh yeah, this really sucks.
Putting the pressure on.
Yeah. But so like the Hot Shot Vapor, which is a nice release, and pretty much all of these are really nice releases. It just didn't fit my hands. And then I started doing some more research, and this was like last year. I started reading about hinge releases and started to have an understanding of hinge releases, how they work and what they're good for. I'm like, you know what? I want to try this. So I ended up getting a couple different hinge releases in around the same time. I got a Carter's 2 Moon and then a Scott Longhorn, kind of an older school style. And funny story about that, like the hinge release, the way they operate is you rotate them in your hand and then they go off. And like I said, we'll include a link with a video description so you can actually see if you don't know what I'm talking about, just because it's way easier to visualize. But
good, then I'll learn.
Yeah, but the way they work, it freaked me out. Like I got this in, and I literally, no joke, had a nightmare before about me using this hinge release for the first time and misfiring and sending arrows flying off.
Like into your neighbor's truck or something?
Yeah. Before I actually sent an arrow into my neighbor's truck. That story's to come someday. So like I said, I was like freaked out. So I actually ended up, because of that, I ended up making myself a little like practice rope. So I could practice working on shooting this hinge release, getting the mechanism down, which has served me well later. And so I started shooting these. I found the Carter 2 Moons, which was the small version. Was just a little too small. It was a little too small for my hands. Versus the Scott Longhorn, which I actually really liked. Probably today is one of my favorite hinge releases. I mean, it just fit my hand really well. It just felt good. It kind of had the back end kind of like hooked around and curved around the back couple fingers. It felt good. It was one of those releases that just felt good. So I ended up shooting that. I suck with that one also because I noticed the neck position of the Carter or the Scott Longhorn was pretty similar to the Spot Hog Whippersnapper, so I had the same anchor point when shooting versus the 2 Moons was a lot shorter, so it changed the anchor point. And so that's kind of when I first started realizing, like having different releases, it's important to have ones that have very similar length, so I'm getting to the same anchor point.
Yeah, I imagine that would be a huge deal, especially like how long has this process been? Has it been across the 3 years, or has that been like heavy in the second year?
It was the second year.
The second year got like pretty intense where you're changing all the time.
The second year is when I started. I would say like it started trickling.
Yeah.
Just kind of started. I would say I started exploring.
Sure. Okay. Fair enough.
The full on problem didn't come. It's like drugs, you start slowly.
Right. There's some gateway drugs. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then the addiction hits, and you can't get enough,
and you're lost.
Yeah. And so I stuck with those two for a while, and then I think I was doing some other research, and I ended up coming across a Scott Anchor. Which was it was enclosed around the pointer finger, and I kind of like that design, so I ended up getting that in, and to date, that's probably the one that just felt the best in my hands when not shooting. Like I love like it's
so
heavy. Like it's stainless steel, so it's heavy, and because it's enclosed, like it was basically the adult fidget spinner for me. Like Like I would just have it. I'd be playing with it all the time. It was just it just felt really good as I had nice weight to it. You could spin it around. Like it was just fun to hold. But what I found with that one, I didn't necessarily like how it felt while shooting. The moon system on it, it never felt right for me. Like I always felt like it wasn't as clean as I would like it. But feel wise, it felt really good. I had the adapter so I could run it either a 2-finger or a 3-finger. Both felt really good. But it was the moon system and that and the hook. I didn't care for how it felt. It just wasn't clean. It wasn't as crisp as the Scott Longhorn. So I ended up selling, trading that. And then I started. That's when this was the beginning of 2018. So this is when it really started kicking in. And I'd seen a couple guys out hunting with the hinge.
I thought it already kicked in. Okay. All right.
No, I hadn't kicked in. I was just exploring, man.
Now I'm buckled in.
I was exploring how my feelings.
Here we go.
And so I started like reading and researching how some guys were actually it was Donnie Vincent. I'd seen a little article he was writing about the equipment he was using and how he found that he really liked a hinge release for hunting, how it really forced him to work on the process of shooting while hunting instead of just being able to rip off a shot. So I'm like, oh, that makes sense. And I'm like, I'm going to try that. So I ended up picking up a couple different releases from Carter. I got the Carter Honey 2, and the Total Control, which the Total Control was just a hinge release. That one I right away didn't like it. Just the way the handle design is really flat. It didn't work well for my hands. It just felt super awkward. And then the Carter Honeys, I really like the idea behind it is it's a hinge release, but the thumb pay you like to press down and it's a safety. So when you draw them back, like as long as the safety is depressed, you can rotate that in your hand all you want, and it's not going to go off.
That'd be a nice thing to just kind of set your mind at ease.
Yes, especially for learning how to shoot with the hinge. One with the safety is mentally really helpful.
Yeah, I'd imagine so.
So I really recommend that to anybody looking at hinge releases. Getting one with the safety, it was huge in helping me mentally learn how. And so I ended up trying the Honey and the Honey 2. I just like the feel of the Honey 2. And how that felt compared to the Honey, and so I ended up using that. I lost my list here. Shoot, we gotta look in. And so I ended up using that for turkey hunting last fall. And I really, like I said, I liked how it felt. But when I had an opportunity to get a shot off, that's when I realized I wasn't ready to use a hinge release because I had a shot on a turkey and ended up pulling off the shot, but I jerked it. And again, kind of going back to the process, I still hadn't really developed my process or cognitively.
So jerking it with that type of release in this case was essentially like the slapping a trigger.
Yeah, slapping a trigger. Yeah,
you're
essentially.
Like, now's the time, and you just try to rip it off like real quick.
Yep, and I ended up pulling the shot off to the right.
I imagine it would be way worse doing that than a trigger slap, I feel. Like if you're just like,
yeah. I would say it actually, probably for me, it reduced the amount of air, but
nice.
It still caused enough air for I was like, after turkey season, I was like, I don't know if I'm ready to shoot a hinge release while hunting.
Yeah.
Just trying to go through that whole process and focus on the shot process and hunting and taking in animals. So it's like, you know what? I think I need to reevaluate what I'm doing here. And that's when I ended up following John Dudley, Knock On podcast and his stuff and all his videos on shooting and form. And so I ended up committing and I got a Knock On Silverback.
Ooh.
Yeah. Which was probably the most expensive release at the time that I had gotten. But it's a what style is it?
Is that the one with like you have like a single knuckle in there and then a finger kind of over the?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a 2-finger version of the Carter Evolution, and it's I keep spacing on the word. It's like a resistance style, a tension style.
Back tension?
Yeah, it's a back tension style release where basically it's got a hook in it. You push the hook down, and then you put it on your D loop, and then you depress on the thumb button as the safety. You pull back, you get into anchor, and then it's set to where the release is anywhere from like 3 to 5 pounds pull pressure greater than your holding weight.
Okay.
And then what you do is you end up pulling through till that hook breaks and opens. Mm-hmm. And then obviously your shot gets released. And the beautiful thing about that is that's when my form really started changing, and I started realizing, kind of getting into that understanding the process better. As I was forced to work on pulling through the shot, which you're supposed to, using that good back muscle tension. And it forced me to cognitively have to pay attention to my shot process and shot execution, and really what was going on the back end of my body, rather than just trying to aim, and trying to make the arrow go where I wanted, versus just setting that pin on the target and then focusing on what I was doing and just let the process take over. And that was a game changer, getting the knock-on silverback. And so I kept that for a while, really, really enjoyed that. And then that's when I started looking at some other releases, looking at some that were similar, because John Dudley's got 3 releases in his lineup, and at the time it was a silverback, and there was the knock to it, which was a thumb release. And so I had picked up, I ended up getting a Hot Shot X-Spot brass knuckles, which is 3-finger brass version, and then the Hot Shot Deuce, which was the 2-finger version. It was a thumb release.
And so this is where like you and I will differ, where I'll find something that I'm like happy with or that I enjoy, and I'm like, all right, let's never change it again, and let's focus on the hunting. Whereas you're like, oh, I like this, I'm happy with it. Okay, let me try some other ones. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's super. I mean, we're so opposite in that way.
Yeah, I had a couple buddies that shot archery, and they kept seeing like pictures of a new release they got. They're like, well, when you ever gonna, like stick with one? I was like, I don't know. Like, I just enjoy trying this.
Could be never. We'll see.
So I ended up, I got the Hot Shot ones in, like that. And then a little bit later, I ended up getting also Carter Evolution, which is a 3-finger version of the knock-on silverback and the Carter Wise Choice. And I played around with those 5 releases, and it came down to I kept the Carter Evolution, sold the silverback just because, despite it being the same thing, the silverback was going for a lot on eBay because everybody was wanting one. So I sold that just for financial reasons. I could make money off of it and have the same thing in the Carter Evolution. I sold the Hot Spots or the Hot Shots, and I kept the Carter Wise Choice. And really the only reason I did that was size-wise, they were both the same. They fit both of them fit my hand great. They felt great. Like, out of all the releases up to that point, like, I liked those 2. The only difference was at the time the Hot Shot, the hook you had to manually set. You would depress the locking mechanism in, and then you had to manually set the hook in the closed position. Whereas the Carter Wise Choice, as soon as I depressed the locking mechanism, it would automatically close the hook or the jaw on the string. So I went with that just purely for that reason. Like I said, but both were great shooting releases. They fit my hand really well. And I really liked them. Like I said, they're same size. I was getting the same anchor point and everything. And so I started running with that. And then, of course, this was last summer, and this is when the addiction just really started kicking in, and I found nothing but releases, Facebook site, and I went crazy. Just went crazy, full blown, and started trading, selling, buying releases. And so I picked up I think at the same time, like within the same week, I got a Hot Shot X Stacy, which is their hinge release version. I got the 3-finger version. I got the True Ball Abyss, which was a thumb release, and the True Fire Sear, which was a hinge release. And I played around with those. I found the Hot Shot XAC 3-finger was just a little too small for my hands. The True Ball Abyss, the handle felt a little small. And the True Fire Sear, actually, the only reason I got those because some guy was selling 2 of them for a super good price. I'm like, oh, I'll buy them and resell them and make some money, which was what I did. So I shot them. I liked them. I liked how they felt in the hands. But I don't want to keep them just because I'm not necessarily, if I'm honest, a fan of True Fire's overall quality. I think the metal they use is kind of soft compared to some others, and the design of it, there's just too many problems I was hearing. But they felt good in the hands, especially the 3 fingers. And so I ended up selling all 3 of those after I got them. Played around with them. They weren't special.
Yeah.
And then I ended up finding a little while later a Bernie's Knuckle Under 4-finger, which is the same hinge release that I had gotten for my first hinge release, but now of course I knew how to use it. But the first one I got was a 3-finger. I remember that one fitting well. I probably would have kept it if I had known how to use it back then. But I got the 4-finger version this time. Like, I'll try 4-finger. It was a good price. Did not like it. Like I found at this point, like all 4-finger versions I'd found, I just could not get my pinky to fit right. Like, they just felt awkward. So I ended up selling that. Then I got a True Ball HBX, which was like at the time was their top of the end release. And it was like this crazy hybrid, like thumb button hinge back tension release that was really cool. Like design, when I first seen it, I was like, ooh, that'd be really fun to have that. Like, they just look cool. It was used by...
It looks sexy.
Yeah, it looked really sexy.
Like, dang, could you imagine what that would look like in my hand?
Oh, I know. Like, it would have to turn me into a top shot shooter.
Oh,
no doubt.
Minimum.
Yeah.
Minimum.
And so I got
think it comes preloaded with like 15 sponsors.
Oh, totally. Yeah. It was going to change me. Well, I got it, and it didn't change me. And it just didn't necessarily like how the mechanism of how it worked. It was kind of a funky release. Wasn't horrible, but it was just like, yeah, it just wasn't that great. And then a little while later, I kind of started pondering the idea of going back to a wrist release. I'm like, I've learned a better process, a better shot process. I'm gonna give this a try, but I'm gonna order a couple nice ones. So I ended up doing some research, ended up picking up a Carter-like mic and a True Ball short and sweet at the same time. And I got them both super nice releases. Like, I really liked how they felt. They had a nice trigger on it. And, but I just, at that point, I could not get them short enough in my hand to match the same anchor point as my thumb releases. It just felt awkward. It threw everything off.
So you had enough of a shot process at this point where you weren't just like looking for a release that necessarily felt good, but also like fit what worked well for your process.
Correct. Yeah. So I ended up selling those. Like I said, they were really nice releases. They felt good. It threw off my process, threw off my anchor point. Just didn't care for them. And so then I started going back. I ended up picking up a Scott Anchor again because I'm like, oh man, I just love how that felt. And then I think I was playing around with trying to find a hinge release. Yeah, I was trying to find a hinge release at that point that was going to match the same neck length as the Carter Evolution, or the Carter Evolution and the Carter. Which one was it? The Carter Wise Choice, which the Wise Choice I was using for hunting. It was a thumb release. Really liked it. Really clean, really crisp. But I needed to find a hinge release that had the same neck length. So I started researching, and the Scott Anchor I knew was going to be really similar. So I got that again, tried it, and just could not could not fall in love with it. I loved how it felt in the hands.
Yeah.
Just hated how it felt while shooting.
Oh, so weird.
Just was not as clean. And then I ended up getting another Carter Evolution Mini, which is just basically Carter Evolution but the smaller ring hole, because how my wife with her shooting, it was like, I'll probably use the Mini myself. So I'm finding one. Really like the Mini versus the regular version. Just the finger hole is smaller, so it like just is a lot more consistent hand placement. And so I ended up selling the Carter Evolution 3-finger. And still have the Mini. That's that. Having a Carter Evolution and that resistance style release has been paramount in my release bag. Just especially if I notice my shot process starts breaking down, I start like trying to punch that thumb or punch that hinge. I'll pick up that resistant release and then just force myself to have to learn to pull through and just have a good quality shot process. So highly recommend having one of those at all times. So I got that, and then I went back and got another Scott Longhorn because I'm like, I remember I liked it. I just remember how the size of the neck compared. So I'm like, I was able to get one, got that in, and again, I love how it felt. Love, just the way it shot, but it was just too long of a neck. So it didn't match up with the same anchor point. So sadly, I had to sell that. I'm like, just because, I wanted to love it. I wanted to like it. I wanted to keep it, but
you gave it a chance.
It just wasn't for me at the time. So then I coming across, got a True Ball Fulcrum, which is the Fulcrum and the Abyss is pretty much the same handle, whereas the Fulcrum's a hinge style and the Abyss is a thumb style. Both were designed by Jesse Broadwater, who's a high-level archery competitor, and the idea was to have like the same handle but two different styles, which was great, but really realized like I actually really hate how small the handle is. It just doesn't, it's like almost too straight. It just didn't fit my hand very well at all. So then I ended up going with I got a Carter 2 Moons again, but I got the large version, thinking, this might match my anchor point a little better. That was just too big.
Okay.
Even though that was one that I really liked. The Carter 2 Moons felt really good in the hands, felt really good in the shot. Just too long of an anchor point. And so then it ended up. I got a True Ball HBC 3-finger medium, which I was reading and seemed like the medium would fit my hand and have the best anchor point. And I got that. I liked it. One thing I like about the True Ball releases that I found, especially for their hinge releases, like they just have a nice, clean, crisp break.
Yeah.
And so I like that, but it just ended up selling that. Just because it wasn't quite what I was looking for. It felt really, like I say, it felt really good in the hands, a nice, clean, crisp break, but it just didn't sing to me. And so then I picked up some more hot shots. I got a Hot Shot Eclipse 3-finger and 4-finger. Finally, I'd been wanting to try one of those for a while, and I find those were just way too small for my hands. Like the Hot Shot Eclipse, super small.
Yeah.
So if you got small fingers, perfect thumb release.
Awesome. I'll look at it.
Yeah. Except it's got a really swept back design, which fits some people's fingers really well. I found for me, a super swept back design is not what I want. And a super straight design is not what fits my hand really well. I kind of need one with a slight curve to it, not too much.
Yeah.
But needs a little bit. And then at the same time, I ended up coming across a Hot Shot Tempest 4-finger. I was looking for a Tempest. I wanted the 3-finger because I like the 3 fingers.
Yep.
And then some guy had one, a 4-finger for sale. I was like, you know what? It was a really good price. I'm like, I'll get it. I'll see. Ended up getting that in. And the moment I picked it up and shot with it, that was it. Like, that was it. Like, that was the thumb release I had been looking for. Even over the Carter Wise Choice, which I really liked, the knock to it. It just fit. I had not had a release fit my hand. It's the way that that Tempest did.
Yeah.
And I fell in love. I fell in love instantly. And I also at the same time had gotten a Hot Shot X Spot.
Yeah.
Non-brass version. And
were those the two you were kind of debating more recently? Like kind of like
Yep.
you're like,
Yep.
I think I got it down to these two.
Yeah, these two, and it just came down to that Tempest. That 4-finger just felt great. It was the only 4-finger I've held to date that it felt really good. And so when it came down to it, I think after all the releases I've gone through, it really I found a couple things was the Hot Shots and then the Carters that I shot were the ones that predominantly fit my hand really well.
Yeah.
And for me, what I found was they weren't, I wouldn't say bulky, but they were slightly thicker handles.
Yeah.
Compared to the other ones, especially True Ball. True Ball I noticed makes kind of smaller handles.
Yeah.
Or like narrower.
Sure.
Maybe not smaller, but narrower.
Yeah.
Versus the Carters and the Hot Shots slightly thicker. And I found my hands prefer a slightly thicker release.
Yeah.
And so quality wise, both top end quality. But the thing that ultimately sold me on going with the Hot Shots was really their customer service and my interactions with them on social media. They were just really had really good interactions with them.
Seemed like they're pretty engaged.
Yeah, really engaged with the
there's
community.
Some back and forth.
Yeah, and so ultimately that's why I ended up choosing to go with the Hot Shots. Too, and that Tempest just fit my hands super well. Like,
Yeah,
loved how it felt. So,
yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like there's a ton of this process. Sounds like personal preference, right?
Yep.
I mean, ultimately, you're probably gonna have to try a few out,
Yep.
right? But what would you say if you could do like one or two things
Mhm.
that's gonna save some people some time and heartache
Yep.
and money? what would you give as a tip as far as looking for a release?
Yeah. Oh, one release I forgot to include on the list was I had gotten a Stan SX2, which was a thumb release. Super nice release, super clean, super crisp, fit my hand really well. The only thing you didn't like about it was you had to manually set the hook.
Mm-hmm.
And so the difference, like I said, the Hot Shots, you have to manually set the hooks. But the difference was the hooks in the Hot Shots are on the right side versus the hooks are on the left side for the stands. And when you go to try to set it in there, like it just doesn't, like it was super awkward with the stand to try to set that hook versus the Hot Shot. And we'll include a little video on this.
Yeah.
Like the Hot Shot, like that hook just sits right there by your pointer finger. So you can come in, go up to your D loop and boop, just hook it in. Whereas that stand, it was just super awkward having it on the other side. So that was the big thing. Really the only thing that I didn't like about the stand.
Just like, it didn't create like a natural motion that you were.
Hunting wise, that's
like,
going to be super awkward. So whereas a Hot Shot style on the right, it's just a nice natural hook in with your fingers. So we'll do a video on that.
Sweet, awesome. So like one or two things.
Yeah, one or two
would
things.
you say is like the biggest thing you'd suggest that will help somebody save some time, heartache, and money?
Yeah. So if you're looking, I would highly suggest trying to go to an actual like shop, an archery shop or pro shop or wherever you can go to where you can go and try a bunch of releases. That's one thing I wish I had done, where I just went down to one of these archery shops and just played around versus just trying to do all these by myself. So go and try whether you want to shoot a wrist release, a thumb release, a hinge release. Just go and try and see what feels good.
Yeah.
Because that's the biggest thing. What feels good.
Well, and also I think one thing that I think is encouraging to me is that just because I find something that I think feels good, I'm only comparing that to what I've already tried, right? And so to be able to be willing to extend it to maybe something that you maybe you're at a spot where you think you're pretty happy with it.
Yeah.
But thinking about the benefits of being able to improve your shop process, I think that's pretty cool to keep that in mind, I guess.
Yeah.
Where it's like, because I'm very prone to, does it get the job done? Great. Okay, done.
Yeah.
Whereas could I do a better job in the process of my shot if I had a different style release?
And I think that plays in part of it. I think what I know now was changing your equipment, while might make you a better shot temporarily, isn't going to fix whatever issues you have long term. Like, you have to really learn your shot process and be cognitive about that. And then whatever equipment you choose, is fine. But I do know having a better quality release once that shot process is learned does make a difference. Like, that compared to that first hinge release or first wrist release I had, compared to the wrist releases I just tried recently, if I had stuck with those ones, like, night and day difference in how much better they were, how much cleaner and crisp the triggers were on them.
Yeah.
Made a huge difference, but that pales in comparison with actually being able to learn a good shot process. Because you can pick up any release, no matter how crappy it is,
right,
and still execute a good shot.
Yeah.
Especially for hunting. So...
yeah. So I imagine I know the answer to this, but we'll go over it just to be clear. I don't think you'd mind if they do have a question on a specific one, because 41 releases is impossible to cover in a podcast, right? So we kind of flew through it. But also, if someone has like a specific question on maybe any one of those, or if they want to reach out and get some kind of information, would you be open to that?
Oh yeah.
And where can they find us?
Obviously you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, probably the best places to reach out if you have any questions, or even on my personal Instagram or Facebook, or Ethan's if you want. He'll direct you to me.
I'll redirect you.
Yeah. You can also find us on Podbean and iTunes if you want to listen to all of our other great content.
Yeah, and we got a few videos up on YouTube as well. So I got a few of the previews from our episodes if you're interested in kind of figuring out which one what's going to pique your interest the most. Otherwise, I'm good if you're good, dude.
Yeah, I'm good. So like I said, if anybody's got questions, feel free to hit me up.
Shoot him his way.
All right.
Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Peace out.
Peace out.